These are the other factors which are related with demand. You see, in your book, you will find it on page 24. You see, these are the factors. Okay, factors that may shift the demand curve. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different factors are given. So we have just summarized those points here. Okay, these are the factors related with demand. Apart from price, okay, one is income, another is advertising, tastes and fashion. Price of related goods. Related goods are of two types. One is substitute, another is complement, and finally it's population. In your book, it's written as demographic changes, and population is the same thing. So let's try to understand how these factors are related with demand and how changes in these factors changes the demand curve. So before going to any in-depth analysis, let's understand one thing. If only price changes, if price falls or rises, there is always a movement on the same curve, on the same demand curve. But if any of these factors change, then definitely it will not be a movement, it will rather be a shift. And a shift is when a curve changes from its original position and shifted to a completely different position. It can shift to the right, it can also shift to the left. This is shift. Okay, so if any of these factors changes, there will be a shift on the demand curve. Now let's proceed on. You see, try to keep this thing in mind always when you are learning, when you are analyzing shift of different curves. Keep that in mind. If any curve, it can be a demand curve, it can be a supply curve, it can be any curve, it doesn't matter. If any curve shifts to its right from an original position, okay, shifts to right, it means that variable is rising or increasing. For example, if the demand curve shifts to the right from D1 to D2, if it shifts to the right, it means demand is increasing. Shift to the right means increase. And if it shifts to the left, for example, if it shifts to a newer position here from D1 to leftward, it means demand is falling. So shift to the left means decrease. Okay, now how does income affect the demand curve? Okay, try to understand. Always try to keep this table or this scenario on your head. When we are learning this, you need to keep that on your head. Okay, so if price rises, it becomes expensive. Usually you're supposed to reduce your consumption, but if your income rises, it means that you have more money on your pocket, you can purchase more things, definitely your demand will rise. So if income rises, demand will rise, and demand curve will shift to the right from D1 to D2. Okay, it's very easy. On the other hand, if income falls, you have less money to buy, your purchasing power is lower now, so definitely your demand will fall and demand curve will shift to the left from D1 to D2. Okay, this is how shift occurs. Okay, so this is how income affects the demand curve. Now let's move on. The second factor that affects the demand curve is advertising. When business organizations invest on advertising more and more, it makes their product popular. As a result, more advertising increases the demand for that good, and definitely it will shift the demand curve from D1 to D2 to the right. Demand rising, demand curve shifting to the right, demand rising. Okay. Now, if advertising falls, that means if business organizations reduce their investment on advertising, okay, investment on advertising is falling as a result. Okay, this is a scenario given. This was the original demand curve D1. If investment on advertising falls, what will happen? Demand will rise or fall? Definitely it's going to fall. No advertising means the product will become less popular, and as a result demand curve will shift to the left from D1 to D2. Next factor that affects the demand curve is taste or fashion. Sometimes in some other books you may find the term preference. Same thing. Okay, taste for some product, liking. Okay, something becomes fashionable, you like it more or less. Okay, preferences, kind of similar things, all of them. So if if your taste for a particular thing increases, suddenly you have developed a taste for a particular product, or if a product become more fashionable now, a word goes with this situation which is called trend. Okay, trend. So for example, this is a trend nowadays. This type of dress is a trend. Using gadgets and gears and playing online games became a trend nowadays. So it doesn't go with the trend. These are the examples we listen from our surroundings related to trend. Fashion becomes a trend. This is a trend. This dress is more fashionable. So if something becomes more fashionable, taste for that one rises, preferences rises, definitely demand will rise and shift to the right from D1 to D2. Okay, if taste, fashion, if something becomes less fashionable or taste for that one falls, you don't like it anymore. So it doesn't matter if it becomes cheaper. If we go back to our original table, okay, for example, if price falls, for example, from 120 to 10, 100, if price falls, you are expected to raise your demand. But if you don't like that product anymore, definitely your demand will not rise. So these are other factors apart from price, which is fashion. If something becomes less fashionable, demand will fall and shift to the left. So we have three more factors left for discussion. Next one, number 4, is price of substitute items. These are called related goods. Okay, related goods. We did see that. Related goods. Related goods are of two types. One is substitute. Substitute means when the purpose of one item is served by another item. If you don't find one item, you can manage with the other one. For example, Pepsi and Coke. They're substitute items. If you don't find Pepsi, you will go for Coke. If you don't find Coke, you will go for Pepsi. Substitute items. Tea, coffee, another example. So price of substitutes. So if the price of a substitute item rises, what effect does it have on the demand on the other factor? For example, if the price of Pepsi rises, what happens to the demand for Coke? You see, if the price of Pepsi rises, let's consider the case, say this is price of Pepsi, this is price of Coke. Okay, so consider that per liter of Pepsi was previously 60 taka, Coke was also 60 taka. So if Pepsi becomes expensive, like 60 to say 75 taka per liter, and price of Coke remains the same, definitely Coke is more cheaper now, and your demand for Coke will rise immediately. So if the price of Pepsi rises, demand for Coke, that means demand for the substitute item, will shift to the right. That means demand will increase. On the contrary, if price of Pepsi falls, okay, for example, if it becomes less than 60 taka and price of Coke remains 60, then Coke is expensive now, and demand for Coke will fall, and it will the demand curve will shift to the left. Okay, so when the summary is, when the price of a substitute item rises, demand for the other substitute increases. When the price of a substitute item falls, demand for the other substitute falls. Okay, very good. Now, next one is price of complement, another related goods. Complement. Complementary items are those items which are consumed together, okay, jointly consumed. You need both the item to consume at the same time. For example, car and petrol, tea and sugar, both of them, okay, these are complementary items. You need both of them to consume at the same time. So these are called complements. So now, what happens if the price of a complementary item rises? What happens to the demand for the other complement? We see the relationship between car and petrol. If the price of car rises, if car price rises, car became more expensive, definitely you will buy total amount of consumption for car in the whole economy will fall, and less car is bought, it means you need less petrol. So definitely demand for petrol will fall, and it will shift to D1 to D2. So when the price of car rises, demand for petrol falls, and demand curve shifts to the left. Now, opposite case is when the price of car becomes cheaper, when price reduces. So now if the price of car falls, it means that price is cheaper nowadays. So people will buy more car and they will need more petrol. Definitely demand for petrol in this case will rise, and demand curve will shift to the right from D1 to D2. Okay. Last but not the least is demographic change, as it is written in your book. It's same as population. Demography means population. Something related with population is called demography. Okay, so demographic changes mean change in population. If population rises, for example, in a particular country, if the total population increases over time, definitely now more and more people are on that economy, and they will demand more. Together, their combined demand will be higher nowadays. Because of that, definitely, when population rises, demand also rises, demand increases, and demand curve shift to the right from D1 to D2. If population falls, demand falls, demand curve shift to the left from D1 to D2. Understood? I think it's very easy. Overall, I think it was helpful for you. The thing is, you need to read your chapter thoroughly. If you have any doubt or any confusion arises while you are reading through the chapter, let me know through the WhatsApp group. Okay? Now, that was all from chapter 4. You have now some homeworks. It's directly from your book. Go to page 28. You see, there's a case study given. Based on this extract, you have 4 questions, chapter questions. So this is your homework. Okay? Chapter questions 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So this is your homework. You need to submit your homework, within 2 days, I guess. It will be enough. So today is 12th, 13th, 14th. Your deadline for submitting the homework is 14th of this month. That means 2 days later. And what you are expected to do is you write these answers. You don't need to type it on your computer. You just write it on your notebook. Okay. Take a snap and submit on the WhatsApp group. I think it's better if you submit on my inbox rather than on the group directly, because it may annoy the other people on that group. Okay, so best of luck and see you on next class.